So our third speaker studied at the Philippine Science High School main campus, batch 1975, and obtained a BS physics degree, uh, cum laude, I think, from the University of the Philippines in 1979. He then went on to study for priesthood in the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. He obtained his PhD in philosophy from the said university in 2001. He is currently a lecturer of religion and philosophy in the University of Asia and the Pacific in Pasig City. Everyone, please welcome Father Cecilio L. Magsino, who will talk about roboethics. His talk is entitled AI and Ethics. Can we convict? Can we convict an AI-driven humanoid robot of murder? Father says.
Thank you, Pros. Good morning to everyone. So I begin this talk. I once learned that a good way of teaching young people is by starting the lesson with a question to tease their minds. And so I begin by asking that question. Can we convict a humanoid robot driven by AI of murder? What principles of ethics involved in the work of scientists in the field of artificial intelligence? At first glance, a first approximation seems that there is not much sense in convicting a robot of murder. If we did, we might put the robot in prison to punish him. For human persons, imprisonment means being deprived of freedom, a situation the prisoner usually resents. Its main purpose is his rehabilitation or correction, aside from punishment. A robot might not resent being deprived of freedom, and its rehabilitation might be better achieved by reprogramming it. Besides, the person who might be truly guilty of the crime the robot committed is the human person behind the actions of the robot, and he might go scot-free. Let's talk about ethics and morality. We typically use these two words interchangeably. They have to do with the goodness and evil of human acts, but they do not mean the same thing. We must be very precise and scientific about these two concepts and not give in to ambiguity and vagueness. Morality is a quality of our human acts that makes them good or evil, while ethics is the study of this quality. Morality is about how we realize, see, discern, specify, and qualify the goodness and evil of our human acts, while ethics describes and specifies the norms and rules that must govern human acts. This is one difference between the two. I hope you can see it. There's another difference, and it is an important one: the perspective or viewpoint. Ethics is done from the perspective of the observer, third-person viewpoint, if you wish, while morals is discerned from the perspective of the agent or doer of the action, first-person perspective. The perspective of ethics is that of a judge, someone looking at an action from the outside. The judge is supposed to be objective and detached from the person and the action he is judging. He must apply the laws and the rules that govern the person and the action at hand. The perspective of morals is that of the one doing the act, looking at things from the inside. He also applies some quote-unquote rules, we may say, But these rules are not written or enunciated as in written rules. They are embedded in his reasoning and acting. Take, for instance, the first moral principle: good is to be done and pursued, and evil is to be avoided. As soon as we make practical choices, we follow that rule. But we do not express it to ourselves explicitly. We know that you know it as it is stated only by reflecting on our practical choices. If you want to know which comes first, ethics or morality, or which one is based on which, I will say that morals come first, and ethics is based on morals. The norms and rules of ethics are simply linguistic expressions of the moral principles as applied to concrete problems and situations. And so ethics must be grounded on morals. An ethics that contradicts morals will be unethical. About morality, I said that morality concerns discerning the goodness and evil of human acts from the first person viewpoint. And how does this happen? How do we know how our acts or that our acts are good or bad? We know the goodness or evil of our acts in a natural and spontaneous manner. To use technical language, we can say that we are quote unquote hardwired with this knowledge, or it is quote unquote programmed into our nature. If you have observed kindergarten children playing their games, you must have observed how after the teacher gives them the rules of the game and one of them cheats, the rest will complain, unfair. And so the sense of fairness is embedded in their nature. We can say that fairness or justice is a value, and our mind tells us that we must practice it. We attach the concept of good to fairness and bad to unfairness. The mind that we are talking about here is called the practical reason, to distinguish it from the speculative reason. These are the two functions of our mind or intellect. The term speculative comes from the Latin speculum, which means mirror. The speculative reason mirrors reality to us. By it, we know reality through science, mathematics, history, economics, and so forth. The term practical reason comes from the Greek word praxis, which means deed or action. The practical intellect is what kicks in when we are thinking of what the most appropriate or right thing to do might be. Both the speculative and practical intellect proceed by reasoning. What this means is that the mind goes through steps to arrive at a truth or conclusion. Both must start with a beginning, which we call a principle or principles. For example, geometry must begin with the definitions of a point, a line, and a plane. Then we can deduce everything from these starting points. This is true for any science. There are some concepts that are presupposed by the science and that the science will not question anymore. These are its principles. Practical reason also has its principles. These are the starting points for moral reasoning. The most basic one is good is to be done and pursued, and evil is to be avoided. But how does practical reason know what is good? The various cultures of men in history have identified certain acts that are good and have called them virtues. They are acts that are most reasonable and they make men truly human. We said that goodness and evil are qualities of human acts. But what is a human act? It is whatever a person chooses to do and effectively does it knowingly and freely. Freedom is a very important component of a human act. It is what makes a person properly human in the sense that the act will really pertain or belong to the person who does it. If a person are forced to do something, the act will not be imputable to him. It somehow does not belong to him because he did not want it. Now, the question we can ask is, are robots driven by AI moral agents like persons? Well, you might be a better position than me to answer that question. AI can mimic both speculative and practical reasoning. They can be programmed to do so. They can also learn. AI can also mimic freedom. It may seem that AI can make decisions that are not determined to just one end, thus seeming free. But at the end of the day, AI robots are not persons, but only machines. Their acts cannot have the quality of morality, first person perspective, but only the quality of being ethical or unethical, third person perspective. They just mimic freedom, but they are not truly free. And so they do not have a sense of responsibility. They do not own their acts. The persons who created them or made them run are the ones responsible for what the robot does. What about ethics? We now ask this question, can we say that an AI robot's action is good or bad? Good for whom? Bad for whom? For the robot? A good or bad action done by the robot will not make any difference for the robot. It's just a robot that performed a good or bad action. The case is very different with persons. Free acts that humans do are self-referential, meaning they shape the person doing them. A person who lies makes himself a liar. A robot who lies will make us think we just have to reprogram the machine. The good or the bad descriptors that we attach to AI actions do not really make any reference to the AI itself. We are really referring to the effects of the AI on persons. The AI is good if it does good to persons. The AI is bad if it does harm to persons. We are adopting the third person perspective, that of a judge, and we are judging the actions of the AI machine. This is the perspective of ethics. Can you program moral values and principles into an AI robot? In principle, you can. A robot can be programmed such that when it is driving a car and it senses a man crossing the street, it should choose to stop because it was programmed to follow the rule you should not kill a human being. But this algorithm will not make the robot a moral person because it was simply programmed to act in such a way. It does not have any other choice. It does not have freedom. And where there is no freedom, there is no morality. But suppose we program the robot to have quote unquote freedom. Will you trust the robot to drive your car? Will you give him a gun? The unpredictable nature of AI algorithm outcomes will tell us it will be wiser not to allow a quote unquote free robot to drive your car, much less give him a gun. Rules and laws are not for robots, but for human beings who make them. Eventually, the world must come up with laws and regulations governing the making and deployment of AI robots. Responsibility and accountability for them must be made very clear. It seems to be getting clear that it is not advisable to give AI systems autonomy, such that you cannot override them, shut them down, or turn them off. Primacy must be given to the human person, and AI must be at the service of the human person. The person must not be enslaved by AI. It is true that AI systems can become super intelligent and human beings can be way behind. But this should not mean that AI becomes our masters. On the one hand, AI robots must be made to aid and enhance human life. Think of robots that can perform tasks ordinary mortals cannot do, like clear up nuclear waste or perform nanosurgeries to save lives. Robots that dispense medicines at the right time and dosage so that old people who cannot remember these things will get their adequate medication. Robots that can deliver medicines and food in COVID infested areas. Robots that can dive and search for an airplane that crashed in the sea. Robots that can find people trapped in a cave and rescue them, and so forth. On the other hand, it must be made illegal to mass produce robots whose sole purpose is to kill people with 100% effectiveness. Imagine the terrible scenario that such robots fall into the hands of a madman. Movie producers have very creative imaginations when it comes to movies about AI. It seems that their favorite theme is about AI outwitting humans and ending up dominating them in the world. Watch a recent one called Upgrade. These possibilities might just happen if we do not put certain rules and limits in creating and making AI systems. To end, we must answer our first question in the negative. But that is not the end of the discussion. We conclude that we must hold their makers and the deployers accountable and responsible. And we must make rules and laws that will govern how human beings will create and develop AI. Well, that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Father Sess, for enlightening us on morality, ethics, reasoning in action, goodness and evil of human actions. Well, it's also interesting to know that our morality is hardwired biologically. So we have learned that robot actions are not human actions, that robots do not have morality, but we can speak of robot ethics. When there is no freedom, there is no morality. So again, please reserve your questions for later.